YouTube, this weekend Victory Road hosted a huge online major tournament for Series 12. It was the first one we really saw, and it had over 540 participants, and there's actually a Google Doc sheet that has all the teams that were in that tournament into one single sheet. It's absolutely incredible. If you want to go check it out, you can go check it out in the description down below. I will link it, and make sure you go check out VGC PokePace, which is a Twitter that had the Google Docs with all of this. All the data was collected through Victory Road plus VGC Pace, and VGC Pace Google Doc is what we're looking at. So make sure you go give them a follow. They also do like sample teams as well and collect these pace, as you can see. So it's absolutely an incredible resource. Make sure you go check it out. I'll link them in the description down below. But yeah, we get to check out all this data right here, but I'm not going to go through all of it, of course, because there's so many teams. They literally have all the teams here. 531 teams that were submitted. There were probably like a few players who just forgot to submit a pace in general and got DQ'd. It is an open team sheet pace. Like, the pace aren't absolutely complete. It was an open team sheet tournament, so what that means is you have all the movesets shown as well as the items, but you don't have the EV spread shown or the IVs. But mainly for the purpose of information, the movesets and the items are usually the most important. So that is what we like to see here. And yeah, if you want to go check it out, you could go check it out. Like, all these different teams, there's too many to cover, and I really want to focus the top cut ones. They don't really showcase, I think, individual player, but they have all of them for the top cut teams, which is really important. So there's a lot of teams and a lot of fun things you could probably look at and see like what kind of strats players are using. So we have all the usage stats here from the entire tournament based off all 531 teams. We have Incineroar as the number one used Pokemon. Incineroar is just a really solid Pokemon in restricted formats. It's a really solid staple support Pokemon. It has great typing. Fire and Dark is absolutely incredible. Parting Shot, Fake Out, U-Turn. It's just has so much utility from this one Pokemon alone. It just fits so well on different teams, and it works on Sun, it works on Rain, it works outside. It's just an incredible staple no matter what restricted format or what format in general. As long as Pokemon's around, it is absolutely incredible because it gives you momentum, it gives you support utility, it can give offensive momentum to certain Pokemon. Like against Venusaur, this Pokemon's pretty solid. So absolutely incredible. Then the next Pokemon, the highest usage stat restricted, is Zacian, which is no surprise because Zacian just pairs well with a lot of other restricteds. It's also probably arguably one of the most powerful restricteds. Its typing is really solid. Fairy and Steel's incredible. It's fast. The Human Blade basically ignores Dynamax when it's dealing damage. It's absolutely incredible. It's powerful. It hits hard. It's an insane Pokemon. It synergizes so well on many different archetypes, especially with like Rain and Sun. It like fits with so many restricteds. It's probably the Pokemon that synergizes the most with every restricted possible. 42% of players use Kyogre, which is a little bit higher than expected, because I would say I would have guessed like maybe Kyogre 30 to 35%. That's where I would have probably said max, but no, 42% of players use Kyogre throughout the tournament, which is absolutely insane. And of course, it does get Rain. It hits really hard. Water Spout. It has a lot of good Pokemon that can give full support to Kyogre. It's a really powerful Pokemon that can easily sweep through teams on the right position. I'm no surprise it's a high restricted, but I'm actually surprised it's this high in usage. Then 30% of teams use Grimmsnarl. And of course, in the Dynamax format with screens are so valuable in the Dynamax format. And then you got stuff like Trick, Lagging Tail, Thunder Wave. You have Scary Face as well. And, you know, its typing's pretty good. Like Sucker Punch, Foul Play, Spirit Break. These moves are also pretty useful. It just gets a lot of options for support, and to see it being high, of course, with like screens being so valuable in a restricted format, but I'm still surprised to see it this high in usage. Venusaur is just a really solid Pokemon. It's great against Groudon and Kyogre, especially with Chlorophyll. With that weather, it's absolutely insane. Gigantamax form, Sleep Powder is very valuable in the Dynamax format as well. It's a pretty consistent Pokemon, pretty strong. Regieleki next. Thundurus is pretty strong electric types with speed control, and Thundurus can also do like Rain Dance Taunt or like offensive. It's pretty strong. And then Yveltal, I'm actually surprised Yveltal's a little bit higher than expected on this list. I thought Groudon would be higher than like Yveltal, but no, Yveltal was actually used on 20% of teams, which is pretty incredible. Amoonguss is actually a lot lower than expected. I thought Amoonguss would be like I thought like Amoonguss would be higher. I thought Amoonguss would have been like one of the top 5, but no, Amoonguss is actually lower than I thought, because Spore, Rage Powder, it's just so good in like dual restricted formats, and it's pretty nice. I think in general, I think it could give a lot of momentum to like Kyogre, Zacian, and a lot of other restricted. So Landorus, I think this is where I would expect it to be. Dynamax Landorus with Intimidate's pretty okay. So, and then you got stuff like Rillaboom, Tornadus, Gastrodon being this high is actually kind of surprising. But I guess because it deals okay against Kyogre plus Zacian, because it ignores the Kyogre water moves and usually can take a hit from Zacian with Intimidate support. So I guess that kind of makes sense. There's a lot of other things that can be analyzed here from the usage stats, so I won't go too much in detail, but that's what I would say about like the top 10. I'm still surprised that Groudon's a bit lower than expected, actually missing the top 10 slot. But I guess since there are a lot of players who just use Zacian, Kyogre, and we're actually going to see restricted pairs right here. So yeah, no surprise, Zacian, Kyogre was the highest usage stat restricted pair with 23%. It's almost double of what the second one is, but yeah, it's really strong. Of course, Zacian plus Kyogre. Rain really helps out with the Zacian, and Kyogre just hits fire and ground, which are Zacian's only weaknesses. Zacian can help out against a lot of Pokemon that Kyogre like struggles against typically, like against Venusaur or Mungus. It does a lot of damage. The Yveltal, of course, Palkia, it's a pretty solid pair. Like it just covers each other's weaknesses so well, while Kyogre just dishes out, they both just dish out so much damage. Next one is Yveltal plus Zacian, which I had pretty high ranked on my tier list, but this high in usage as the second restricted pair. Dark type support again with Zacian. Zacian can help out quite a bit damage wise. I think this is like the better, this is what XY used to be. So XY was Xerneas Yveltal back in like Gen 7, and it was not that great. Like it should have theoretically been great, but it just wasn't. But I feel like the steel type just helps out this pair so much, and especially with like Zacian having initial damage pressure against Incineroar fighting moves definitely does help out, I think, for the most part. So yeah, that's the thing. And then third restricted pair is actually interesting to me, Zacian plus Palkia. So I don't think I rated this high in my tier list, but after I looked at my tier list and gave it some more thought, yeah, it kind of makes sense that Palkia plus Zacian would make a lot of sense. I think it's a bit weaker than the Kyogre, as I think Rain does help out Zacian a little bit more. And of course, like the fairy weakness, like I think Kyogre does better against Zacian than Palkia usually, but it just depends on the team, because Palkia is usually trusted by Play Rough. Even through Dynamax, Play Rough can knock it out. So you usually need more Zacian support than you would like with Zacian Kyogre. But yeah, overall, very solid restricted duo. Palkia is pretty good against like Groudon and a few other Pokemon. And of course, provides that water typing that does help out Zacian. And Zacian can get rid of some threats that Palkia is a little bit annoyed against. And Palkia is just good against weather teams. And then Calyrex plus Kyogre, the Ice Rider. So I know that a lot of players have been experimenting around with like the Mimikyu stuff with Calyrex, just the weakness policy sweep strats. It's really incredible, I think, for the most part. And then Kyogre really threatens Zacian and a few others. Of course, the Rain really helps out Calyrex and dishes out a lot of damage, which I think is pretty strong. Then Groudon plus Yveltal. I think this duo might be a little bit weaker than I initially expected, because I think you usually want Venusaur on the team, which means you have like triple Ice Weak. So if you fight against like Ice Rider or Kyurem White, it's going to struggle a little bit for the most part, but otherwise it's pretty strong against a lot of common things. Like Yveltal and Groudon are both generally bulky. Groudon helps to cover Zacian, which Zacian, you know, is okay against Groudon. It just depends on the situation. Like, are there intimidate factors? Are there screens, for instance? But it can help out, which is pretty nice. And the Yveltal does hit pretty hard against a lot of other restricteds that are not Zacian. So, like, its dark type outplay really does threaten a lot in the format. Solgaleo Kyogre is actually pretty high up there. I guess because you can get a policy up and you have the Trick Room option with Kyogre, which does make a bit of sense there. So, okay, it's a little bit higher up than expected. Zacian, Groudon, you got a lot of powerful. I'm actually a little bit surprised it's a bit lower than I expected, but yeah, it is still pretty strong duo. You have like Charizard, Venusaur, Incineroar, a lot of good supports there. Calyrex plus Zacian, you got two really powerful restricteds, and fighting coverage with the ghost coverage is absolutely incredible, I think, to get as a pairing. Rayquaza plus Zacian, really? Okay. I think it's the same logic as Palkia. Palkia does really well against weather. I mentioned this as weather duos. Like, Pokemon that help against weather will really help with the Zacian support. So, and you do get max airstream, which is pretty big, I guess, for Zacian as well, if you can position it right. So, I guess this does make sense. And then, really, the 10th most surprising for me, Solgaleo and Yveltal. So Solgaleo and Yveltal, I don't remember how high I ranked this. I think I have ranked this like C or B tier. So it's interesting. Solgaleo is okay against Zacian. It depends. Max Quake does threaten though, and Behemoth Blade doesn't really do too much to Solgaleo, so there's that factor. And I guess it could be a really big threat. And the Yveltal does decent against Weather and Calyrex Teams, of course. I'm not exactly too sure of how good this is, but yeah, it is still pretty strong. And then like the other restrictors are like pretty close pairing wise. There's like some interesting stuff like Lunala, I guess that's. And let me see what else I could see here. Lunala, I'm surprised is super high, because Lunala, I feel like I don't think it. Okay, I think Lunala is an okay Pokemon, but I don't see it as outstanding. I feel like a lot of matchups that Lunala has, usually with like a Lunala duo, is usually neutral for the most part, because I feel like spreads like with like Lunadon, for instance, which was something that won Worlds in 2019. I think it had pretty neutral matchups in general. It didn't have like, I feel like other restricted pairs usually had more winning matchups and then more losing matchups. And like Groudon Lunala was more like, you know, you play and it's usually like pretty even for the most part, and it just comes down to play at the end of the day. Like I think Naoto really played super well throughout 2019 Worlds, and that's why he won more than like the team carried him, for instance. Like I think he had enough tools to win and make like any matchup winnable for the most part, and he was able to capitalize them perfectly. So I think it comes down more to player than it does the actual team. But I guess it also comes with the upside that you don't usually have like the worst losing matchups. Maybe Yveltal can be a little bit annoying, but I bet the rest of the team would carry, I feel like, these. And then I think just losing Tailwind makes it harder for the Kyogre Lunala matchup as well, and like other restricted pairs that follow with Lunala. Otherwise, you got some pretty interesting restricted pairs. I'm actually surprised that Kyurem didn't go a little bit higher. I guess you got the Kyurem Zacian, which isn't bad. And yeah, I mean, and you got like some really interesting pairs. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. Then we get the top cut usage stats based off individual Pokemon. So we saw the entire usage stats of the tournament. Then we got the big juicy stuff with the usage stats from overall. So pretty similar, actually. Like a lot of the stats are pretty similar. I guess like Amoonguss is a bit higher, which I'm not surprised about, because you'll flush out some of the restrictors, I guess. Incineroar, Zacian, Kyogre pretty much stays the same. Grimmsnarl stays the same. Thundurus, Alakia, it moves up. Venusaur went down, I guess. And then you have Amoonguss. Groudon still pretty high. Yeah, like as we could see here, Yveltal was higher and then Groudon was lower. And in top cut, it looks like Groudon is higher, which makes sense, I think, for the most part. Then you got Venusaur, Yveltal, Gastrodon. 7 Gastrodon. Amazing. Aeroform was actually pretty high up there, which is actually... I wonder if it's the Iron Defense Body Press set. I guess we could take a look at the teams later on, but yeah, that is a pretty interesting note there. And then we have Eliki, Rillaboom, Seismitoad. Seismitoad was a thing more of like a Series 11. I guess players are using like more teams based off Series 11 stuff, because Seismitoad, I think it picked up quite a bit in Series 11. I'm not sure how good it is in Series 12. I think it's just going to come down to how many grass moves there are going to be out there, but it does have some decent support. Airstream, of course, Max Quake, immune to Eliki and other electric types is pretty nice. So there's that. Then you have like Landorus, Tornadus, and then some other stuff. Some interesting Pokemon, I guess, to note in the top cuts was Raichu, 2 Dittos, and then you got like one of some very interesting restricteds. 1 Dialga, 1 Kyurem White, 1 Solgaleo, 1 Rayquaza. You have 1 Blastoise, a Kingdra, and then Xerneas. Okay, Xerneas getting some representation. Colossal, which is interesting because I'm not sure how big I am on Colossal this format, because Colossal's a Pokemon that I feel like when Kyogre is one of the biggest restricteds, it's going to be hard to use Colossal itself. And Colossal Zacian, like one of the things about Colossal is you can knock out the Zacian and threaten it with the engine, but it doesn't work when there's a Kyogre. So that's pretty interesting. Although you do usually have tools like Rillaboom and stuff. I guess we could take a look at the team later. And Dracozolt, which is cool. Lugia actually made it in. I wonder if it's policy. And then Togedemaru. So I'm kind of curious. All right. But yeah, a lot of the teams, they're pretty similar actually in usage stats, I feel like, for the most part. And yeah, there's definitely some interesting Pokemon that sneaked in. But yeah, a lot of data isn't like unexpected for the most part. It's usually like, I think, within the boundary of ranges, I think. So yeah, but still really cool to see. Like this information is always just really cool to analyze, especially when this was like the big like tournament where everyone's like trying out what they want to try out for like upcoming tournaments, such as like the Japan online qualifiers, because I know a few Japanese players definitely played in this tournament, and they got like online qualifiers starting in February, I believe. So always really cool to see. Now we can go to the top cut teams. This is based, I think, on, I don't know if they're going to update this, but this is based on the Swiss record and not through the like actual like placement stuff. I wonder if they're going to like change that later or just keep it this format. But I do have all the teams that's got in the top 4 over here. We could also check out like the restricted pairs here. So let's see. I'm going to go over, I think, the teams that did well first. So this is the team that ended up winning the event. If you want to see the bracket right here, this was the top 8 bracket. You had Kyle, you have Hiroto, you have Paul, you have Mattia. I'm sorry if I butcher your names. Mike, Jesus, Gabrielle, and Jorg. So I'm sorry if I butchered any of your names. I'm just bad with pronunciation. So this is a team that won the event. This is Palkia plus Zacian right here. And it was pretty interesting. So yeah, I guess maybe I should have put this as low as I did on my tier list, but I spent hours like making the tier list and then I recorded, so kind of like just slipped by me. But yeah, so it's a really strong duo, no surprise there. It does need a lot of support though. I feel like it's really good. The pairs are really good, but you do need a lot more Zacian support for the most part, because Zacian is a Pokemon that can give this team with trouble. And it's no surprise you see stuff like Incineroar, Amoonguss, and Grimmsnarl with screens, making these Pokemon really incredible, because these Pokemon have pretty decent natural bulk while dishing out pretty good offense. And you have like speed control Thunder Wave as well to help support. You got like the Thunderous, which scares out Incineroar and can, you know, provide the airstream support that these teams kind of lack, because this team otherwise the only thing you have is like Thunder Wave support with Grimmsnarl for speed control, but otherwise can usually just sit there, take attacks pretty decently, and fire off some really heavy damage. So it's a really strong team, and I'm not surprised something like this end up winning. I still think Amoonguss is really solid for the most part. Giga Drain is interesting here. I guess it's because of Gastrodon. Yeah, I assume it has to be Gastrodon, which I guess this team can struggle with. So otherwise, I would think it'd be Pollenpuff for the most part. So yeah, that's a cool team. I think Palkia plus Zacian definitely has a lot of potential. Then we have Paul Ruiz's second place team, which is Zacian Kyogre, which no surprise was the strongest duo I think of the tournament, or most popular at least. He had an adjustment with Whimsicott. Usually you see Tornadus is still really strong, pretty much provides some similar supports with Tailwind. Helping Hand is pretty cool, having the taunts as well, and stuff with like Zapdos. Life Orb Zapdos seemed pretty good throughout this tournament. 2 of the top 4 placements did have a Life Orb Zapdos with Kyogre plus Zacian, and I think it's really strong. Zapdos' coverage is absolutely amazing for this team. It helps against bulky waters. Airstream's always really solid, I think, for like both of these Pokemon. And Heat Wave, I think, is really nice here for stuff like Fair Form, which ended up being popular in this tournament. Power Whip is an interesting adjustment, maybe for those Kyogre Trick Room teams that could definitely maybe like hurt this team. Safety Goggles on Incineroar, and yeah, like it just seems like a really powerful team. You have like really strong offensive options with the Kyogre, these Zacian, Zapdos, speed control to Whimsicott, and then like a Fair Form that could be annoying for like the Trick Room teams that want to have Trick Room, like against Calyx Ice Rider and Kyogre teams in general with Trick Room. And then Incineroar is a really good support Pokemon. This team, this was Kyle's team, which was Calyx, Shadow Rider, and Groudon, which is a pretty interesting take. No Venusaur. Yeah, you did have Groudon plus Calyx, Shadow Rider, and it wasn't like a super offensive Calyx. It did have Focus Sash and Wisp support. So I guess Wisp is for Zacian, because Wisp can be incredible, like just for slowing down like opposing Zacians, opposing Groudons, and then your Groudon can generally win, I feel like. And I think that's like pretty strong, I think, especially if you're able to keep up the sun. And Wisp being the Zacian seems pretty solid for like Gastrodon wins, for instance. So yeah, it's a really cool tech, and yeah, I think it's pretty solid. So Safety Goggles Thunderous for the Amoonguss redirection with like, I'm assuming Kyogre, which makes sense. And Charizard dishes out so much damage. Wildfire for the chip damage with Calyx, going to be absolutely incredible for the support. Groudon will help out against the Incineroars as well. And then you have your own Incineroar for Intimidate. It's just really good for setup positions. And then Gastrodon. So I'm assuming Gastrodon was like for Kyogre, Zacian stuff. Yawn is pretty solid for Dynamax formats as well. And it's really hard to maybe take care of Gastrodon for some teams. So yeah, it seems pretty good. And the last one is another Kyogre Zacian team by Mike. And this one, pretty similar. It has Weather Ball on the Zapdos, which I think is really unique. And I kind of like this change. because Weather Ball can threaten the Kyogre, but you do have to switch in the Kyogre, so it really just depends. I thought it would have been Rain Dance on the Tornadus if it's going to have Weather Ball, but still pretty cool because Weather Ball can snipe like Incineroars, for instance. It can snipe Groudons, of course, and there are a few other Pokemon like Landorus, which, you know, don't want to take a Weather Ball or Max Geyser, so that's pretty strong. It looks like a lot of the Amoonguses ran Giga Drain this tournament. I guess Gastrodon was just a common meta thing that seems to be more popular than I expected. So yeah, it seems Amoonguss Giga Drain needs to be the new norm, because normally I would think you would want to have Pollen Puff because Zacian is able to take attacks. You can Pollen Puff Incineroar in certain matchups, and of course Pollen Puff to Kyogre for Water Spout. But seems like a lot of players are just opting for the Giga Drain, and it's, I guess, specifically to hit the Gastrodons, because otherwise Gastrodon usually would be able to take attacks decently well. And then we can go over, I guess, some of the more interesting unique teams that we have here while looking through this top cut chart. So this was the undefeated team. This actually had a Seismitoad right here. It has Seismitoad. It looks like pretty standard to a Series 11 team for the most part, because I think Seismitoad, Kyogre, Zapdos, Grimmsnarl was a core. I don't remember they had Rillaboom, but they added Zacian. Seems pretty solid, like really strong offense. This team went undefeated in Swiss. Seems pretty powerful. I'm pretty sure that Kyle played this player in like the top 32 or top 16. I don't remember exactly how it went. And then it was on stream. I do remember that part. Yeah, it's got some interesting text. The Eerie Impulse, Roost, Zapdos. I'm actually surprised there's no fire move, because I guess Ferrothorn was a bit problematic. You do have a Zacian with Sacred Sword, which is decent, I guess, against it. And then you have Kyogre Water Spout. But otherwise, Ferrothorn does look really annoying for this team. Then, what other things? Oh, Rayquaza got third. Okay. Rayquaza, Zacian, Life Orb Special. Okay. Which makes sense. This just looks like a good stuffs team. Has some pretty solid fast options. I'm assuming their Rayquaza is pretty fast. And then, you know, I think it just has some pretty good support. You have Gastrodon, seems pretty good again against like the Kyogre plus Zacian teams that maybe could get us a bit of trouble. Pasho Berry Incineroar, because it can live a Water Spout, especially with the Airlock, which is cool. And Pollen Puff Amoonguss can help out with like healing these Pokemon. Yeah, it just seems like pretty solid support. Seems like good stuff. Then what other interesting Pokemon do we have out here? Another Zacian plus Palkia team. Oh, we see the Lunadon. Okay. So Lunadon, Groudon, Power Herb Lunala. Okay. With Thundurus, Life Orb, Focus Sash, Venusaur, Leftovers, Umbreon, and then Incineroar. Yeah, this looks like a pretty general good stuff. Like, it just seems like a team that probably has more neutral matchups than like it does winning matchup. But it does seem like it doesn't have that many bad matchups either. So that's how I would imagine it. It kind of looks like a Lunadon that we've seen before, except it has Meteor Beam, which is nice because, you know, Wide Guard, while it can be good, it's like you have to play around Dynamax mind games between Max Geyser, Water Spout, Precipice Blades, Max Quake, all that. So it kind of makes sense to have a consistent option in Meteor Beam, I think, for the most part, especially since it can hit Incineroar, and then the neutral Moongeist Beam does a lot of damage. Looks like a pretty solid team. And then what else do we got here? Let's see. Zacian Yveltal seems pretty common. Dialga Zacian double steel made it? Wait, oh, is this the one who made the Dialga Togekiss team? I think it is. I think this is like the Dialga Togekiss team with like the Ditto. I'm pretty sure this is the player. Pretty interesting stuff. Offensive Dialga was the basis of the team. I'm pretty sure it's probably modest max speed. The Grimmsnarl with support, no fake tears, but scary face. And yeah, this is just such a unique team. It's really interesting because the tools, it just seems like you brute force usually with these. You have Ditto to transform into like any threats, and then you have these, which is probably important because Gastrodon seems pretty nice for like other steel types, which can be annoying and hit with like Sacred Sword, for instance. Just like it just seems like support with like really powerful steals, which is no surprise. All right, let's see what else do we have here. Xerneas. Okay, I think I was looking at this team earlier, actually. I looked at this team earlier. So Choice Specs Calyrex, Terrain Pulse Xerneas. Okay, that's a cool text. So Terrain Pulse transforms into a type of the terrain, basically. So you have grassy terrain, you can have Terrain Pulse. I wonder if this is for specifically Kyogre. It's interesting to have Terrain Pulse. You could also set it up, I guess, with Eliki too, with Max Lightning. I guess, like, out of any Pokemon you would Dynamax, it'd probably be Eliki on this team. If you're using Calyrex, you're probably not Dynamaxing it. Xerneas, maybe you could Dynamax it and then set up Geomancy and Dazzling Gleam and then the Terrain Pulse, which I guess is okay. And then, yeah, I'm assuming Alec is your main Dynamax Pokemon. And then you got like a lot of supports for like Xerneas generally. Calyrex seems like it would just like hit really hard for the most part, dish out a good amount of damage and set up for Xerneas Geomancy, or like Calyrex is it like, or weakens it so Calyrex gets some KOs and then get some boosts. So yeah, very interesting team. And then what else do we have here that looks really interesting? We got Kyogre Lunala this time around with the Seismitoad variant. So I guess is it Trick Room? I'm assuming it's like dual mode here. It does look like that. Yeah, it's the Trick Room Meteor Beam set again with a Solvest Fairform, which is pretty nice. Okay, not really much to say about this team. I mean, we already saw the Seismitoad earlier. I Calm Mind Kyogre. Okay, that's kind of cool. So I wonder if it's like a bulky Kyogre that's like, it's not like the fastest thing I'd imagine, but it's like not too slow either, so it can abuse Airstreams as well. That's interesting. And then, because I think it's a really solid set in general. Did it have screens on the team though? No, it didn't have screens on the team. Okay. Kyurem White here. Okay. So we have Kyurem White with Cotton Spore Whimsicott. And yeah, it just seems pretty powerful. Seems like a pretty fast offensive team. Just like support the Kyurem White in a really solid position for the most part. Yeah, seems like it just dishes out good support. You have Tailwinds, you got Cotton Spore for speed control. You don't need Helping Hand because these Pokemon do absolutely insane amount of damage. You got the Follow Me support to help out as well. And then you got like, you know, good supports in general for the most part. And this will be decent against like some Trick Room stuff. So yeah, it seems pretty good. Then what else? Kyogre Ho-Oh. And I think this is the only Togedemaru that top cut. So we see weakness policy. Okay, normally with Kyogre Ho-Oh, how it used to be playing like 2016, 2019, it was more like defensive generally, I feel like for the most part. This one's taking an offensive stance. So you have like, these Pokemon are pretty good against Zacian, no surprise there. This is not bad against Sun. I mean, it depends because like Groudon's carry Rock Slide in the format. So maybe that's also a thing. But you could probably activate Policy if you get Intimidate, and then the Ho-Oh can really go in and really damage some stuff. So it's pretty solid. You got like the Togedemaru, you have Volt Switch as well to activate the Policy, protect these Pokemon from taking the electric type attacks. Ditto to get maybe potential another restricted. Seems pretty good. And then let me look at what else. Solgaleo, this was one of the, I think the only Solgaleo that cut. A Solvest Solgaleo, okay. With screens, it'd be pretty hard to break through a Solvest Solgaleo, so I do like screens. Calm Mind Kyogre is really solid. Yep, support with the Dynamax from Zapdos, or like boosting up the Kyogre with Steel Spike seems really solid actually. Ooh, that's a cool thing that Solgaleo can do with Kyogre. If it's the Calm Mind Kyogre, that's the Steel Spikes with Kyogre. Yeah, that seems pretty solid. And then Intimidate, so it seems like it's a team that's dedicated usually to supporting the Calm Mind Kyogre. I actually really like that, yeah. Lugia, probably the most interesting teams. Weakness policy, okay. Weakness policy multi-scale with Calm Mind Recover. Doesn't look like, it just looks like a team. It just looks like a team with a Lugia added. You do have the Volt Switch to activate the policy on Lugia, but really I'm kind of curious on like how well this executes, because it just seems like trying to position with Incineroar and Amoonguss, get your Lugia / Zacian to do work. You have Gastrodon for support. I think it's mainly just like try to set up these Pokemon for the most part, but I feel like it plays a bit more passively. It does have like good general bulk as Lugia with multi-scale recover, so you have multiple chances to set up a slow. I guess you play this team pretty slowly, I'd imagine, for the most part. You have to Raichu for like a fast mode. Interesting. Not sure how amazing it is, but I mean, it did top cut, so it must have done something pretty solid. And I think that will cover everything I want to talk about the Victory Road Series 12 Challenge. So huge shout outs to Victory Road, and of course huge thanks to VGC Pokepace for like compiling all this information into one document. Again, I'll link in the description down below and link them in the description, so go check it out. And if you want to check out these teams for yourself, definitely let me know. What did you expect to do well? What did you expect not to do well? And what's kind of surprised you about this tournament in usage stats? There were definitely a few things that I expected, and there were definitely a few things that were higher and lower than what I had previously thought. So let me know in the comments down below. But that'll be it. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, people. And until we bow again, I'll catch y'all later.